LNDN capital expenditure. And just to be clear what we're talking about, this is the local and distribution network, which is the part of the network which goes from the fan site, which is typically the Telstra Exchange building, down the street, past every house, to the pit or the pipe outside the end user's premises. And this is what you can see in the centre of the diagram that you've got at the bottom half of that page. And as you can imagine, this is the part of the network that makes up the single largest component of our forecast $37.4 billion capex in the period to 2021, and it covers about 150,000 kilometres of street distance, so it's a very significant part of the network. Just turning to the chart at the...
Ask a question, Mr Payne.
Sure.
What's the typical distance between the fan and the beginning of the lead-in conduit, or which is, I guess, is the curb?
That might be a better one for... within an FSAM?
Within a fan or FSAM, yeah.
Go from a few hundred metres to 12 kilometres.
12 kilometres is the limit.
12 is the limit, yes.
Yeah, that's the limit. But what's the average we're talking about in the cities? A couple of kilometres or?
You're probably looking at 6 kilometres, I'd say, on average, because it tends to be, as the distance goes out, you're picking up more premises.
Okay, thank you.
So if we just turn to the chart at the top, what this is showing is the average cost per premise passed for that portion of the network, so for the NBN portion of the network. And what we can see there is, starting on the left-hand page and working across to the right, we've got the cost per premise for the initial pre-release sites we did in Tasmania, the Stage 2 Tasmania sites, and the first 5 sites we did on the mainland. And at the right-hand side, we've got what we have in the corporate plan for FY13, so the year we're in at the moment. And there's 3 things I'd really like to draw out to the committee's attention. The first is obviously the significant reduction we've seen over the sites we've already done from the first sites in Tasmania to now. And this is... We're not publishing those numbers. This is to scale, but we're not. I don't have the precise numbers with me.
Okay, so we can get out our ruler.
You could get a ruler and deduce, but I don't have the precise numbers.
But surely, I mean, that's a bit silly, isn't it? I mean, can't you? So you're saying that we should get out a ruler and work out the relationship of the white column with $1,500 to these 3 black columns?
Maybe we should ask why they're not being... There's probably a reason why they're not being...
I think the important number, if I can, Mr Turnbull, is if you look at what's very important for the committee is the number on the right. Obviously, what's important is it's come down substantially. There's low numbers to start with. The number on the right is we are saying our corporate plan, as you can see in the yellow there, we are saying, given our best estimate now, given all the data we have, we are confident that we're going to come in for FY 2013 between $1,200 and $1,500 for this component of the cost per premise passed, which is consistent with the data you would have seen in New Zealand.
And I think the Chorus from New Zealand have fairly recently published data showing their cost per premise falling from around 3,300 last year to 2,700, 2,900 this year, and they're targeting, I think, around $1,200 to $1,500 in the long run.
Is the bottom of the bar 0?
Bottom of the bar is 0, yes, it is to scale, so yes.
Good, just want to check.
Yes, it is. And so the point I want to make out of this is one, that the trend we're seeing is exactly what we expected to see, what we always said we'd see, which is obviously the first sites. One, we were using totally different architecture, totally different construction processes, contracting processes and so on, and obviously very little volume in the early sites. So the big story out of here is that as we move into full-scale production or construction, as Ralph has alluded to, we get the benefits of that scale. That's what we assumed we'd see in the corporate plan, and that's what reality is, what these figures are suggesting is actually going to happen when we get these parts of the network built.
Well, just to be clear, the only reality you've got here is about $3,000. Looks like a bit more than that. And then the rest of it is what you hope to be at the end of 2013.
No,
is
it's
that right?
not a hope. It's a
is it
estimate that the company is prepared to back.
Or not?
We have achieved a certain number of FSAMs that built.
Is it in your plan, or or is it actually delivered?
Some of it is actually delivered, as you heard from Mr Steffens. We have some FSAMs, but we are not prepared to give a precise number or to fill it in black until we have a larger quantity done. That's why we put some confidence limits around it, but I think the committee can be assured we're on track to hit the corporate plan number. And we're prepared to back that.
Can I
Mr Fletcher.
ask a follow-up question on that? Mr. Payne, if I'm right, if you say by the end of June 2013, you will have passed 256,000 premises in brownfields.
286,000.
256.
256.
86.
Well, it says 256 here.
We've already done 30.
Incremental.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Incremental.
All right. Okay. All right. Okay. So, and you say will have cost about $1,200 per premise.
12 to 1,500 for those 256 premises.
Okay. We'll call that $400 million. Is that fair enough? Roughly.
It's probably a bit lower than that, but yeah.
Well, okay. Well, by June 13, according to your plan, what's your cumulative capex going to be on fibre to the premises?
Fibre to the premises, it'll be in the corporate plan. So for the fibre and the transit network, about $1.6 billion. So that, remember, we're just looking at a portion of the of the fibre network. We're not looking at Customer Connect. We're not looking at the transit network. So we're only looking at a portion of it here.
We will talk about the transit.
We'll talk about the transit bit, and obviously Customer Connect, it's a little early to talk about. But if you're trying to reconcile it, this is only a portion of that total cost. And obviously
if you were, because, this is very, really appreciate you pulling this number out, but what is the cost per premise passed, including a fair allocation of the transit network?
We'll provide that. What we'll do, Mr Turnbull, is I think progressively provide more information to the committee as we get sufficient data that says this is how it looks. The corporate plan is our best estimate that we've got now. Of all the elements, and what we're saying is, here is this LNDN element, very important part. We are confident that we're going to be between $1,200 and $1,500. What we would have to do is an exercise of allocating the transit network, and as we've said from the beginning, we are building the transit network out well ahead of the access network because it's a big job. It's needed for fixed wireless, it's needed for satellite, so you can't take the amount we've spent on transit and then divide it by the number of premises we passed. It's not a valid piece of arithmetic.
Mr Payne, I'd just like to ask, you mentioned Chorus before, and I was part of the delegation to New Zealand. They gave us a figure of between 2,200 and 2,400 per premise passed in year 2, but then said it only drops slightly below that each year beyond, yet the NBN seem to be getting a much better return the more premises you're passing. Is there a particular reason you're aware of for that?
Look, I think scale obviously has something to do with it, and probably the density, the size of the construction.
There is one other thing, right? We need to make sure we're comparing apples with apples. The one thing that we found, and we have sat down with folks from Chorus, we're having the experts for 2 days twice. You need to get, when you're doing these kind of comparisons, you need to go through them line by line to really make sure you're comparing apples with apples. You can fool yourself very easily by talking about gross numbers if you don't know what it is you're comparing. We've been through with Chorus in a huge amount of detail. What we're confident to say is we think we're confident we'll be by the end of FY13 at where Chorus wants to be long term for the LNDN component.
And I think it's also more just the shape of the curve we're both seeing as much as the absolute dollars. They're going through exactly the same experience that we are, and every big major network construction company around the world sees similar things. start off up here and work your way down to where you want to be.
Your figures would seem to bear that out. The other thing that I also learned in New Zealand was that premise passed is really only a termination box at the front gate of a premise, rather